Oath of allegiance of a new member. Announcements by the presiding officer. Members, I would like to recognize the first Chief Secretary of the Tobago House of Assembly, Mr. Hochoy Charles, as he joins us today for the fourth sitting of the Tobago House of Assembly. Welcome, Mr. Charles. Members, leave request to be absent from today's sitting was submitted by Assemblyman Watson Duke. The leave is granted. Assembly bills sent back from Cabinet. Assembly laws brought back from Parliament. Petitions, papers, presentation of reports, questions to secretaries, questions for oral answer. Minority Councillor.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. Question to Secretary of Tourism, Culture, Antiquities and Transportation. With the resumption of international flights to Tobago and the return of British Airways flight from London Gatwick to Tobago on January 10, 2022, will the Secretary please indicate the following? A. When did negotiations begin and bookings reopen for the resumption of British Airways flights from London Gatwick to Tobago? And B. Identify all other international flights that are expected to arrive in Tobago in 2022, the date of arrival, name of the airline, country of departure, and date of commencement of negotiations of all international flights listed.
Councillor.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. In response to the question posed by Councillor.
Councillor, is your mic on?
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. In response to the question posed by the Councillor, I would like to state that negotiations with British Airways commenced in October of 2021. The contract was signed on November 27, 2021, and bookings resumed soon thereafter. The international flights expected to arrive in Tobago are as follows. British Airways commenced on January 10, 2022, departing from London Gatwick, and negotiations starting in October 2021. Virgin Atlantic commenced on January 29, 2022, departing from London Heathrow, and negotiations commenced in October 2021. Condor plans to return in the winter of 2022, with no specific date confirmed as yet. That flight is expected to depart from Frankfurt, Germany, and negotiations commenced in October 2021 and are ongoing. Caribbean Airlines is expected to return to Tobago, departing from New York JFK. The actual date of resumption of service is unknown at this time, and negotiations are ongoing. Thank you.
Minority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. This question is posed to the Chief Secretary. as it relates to the new employment across the divisions of the Tobago House of Assembly post-December 6, 2021, will the Chief Secretary please provide the following? A detailed listing by divisions of the name, positions, qualifications, remuneration, and the category of employment of each officer engaged, whether it be short-term, contract, permanent, daily paid, relief, or temporary staff. B, what was the process of engagement for each employee hired? And C, what is the total monthly cost to the Assembly for the engagement of these officers?
Chief Secretary.
Thank you very much, Madam Presiding Officer. As I respond to this question, let me ask your good self and your office to also adopt a practice being held by the Cabinet at the moment, whereby whenever questions are filed, they are automatically sent through the system to, in the Cabinet case, it will be PSs, and in our case, it will be administrators. That way, public servants are able to supply the responses in a timely manner. That wouldn't result in officers being up at midnight attempting to collate the information from across all divisions. Having said that, I wish to, at this time, read to the entire House the full list of persons employed within the Tobago House of Assembly between December 6 and present. And let me start by saying I'm happy to announce that between December 6 and present, we have employed significantly less people than we did in the 2 months leading up to the elections. And the list is as follows. Starting with community development, no particular order, starting with community development, youth development, and sport. In that division, employed was Marlon Crease, occupational safety officer, has a BSc in occupational safety and health, salary 9,205, allowance 1,500. That's on contract. The position was advertised and candidates were interviewed. Kalisha Baird, also occupational and safety officer, has a BSc in environmental science and sustainable technology. Salary, same as before, 9,205. Allowances, 1,500. Contract, position was advertised and candidate was successful interview. Community development, youth and sports, staying with that division, Mr. Gladstone Solomon, advisor to the secretary. He has a master's in agriculture and rural development. The salary for an advisor to the secretary is 19,400, 2,700 in allowances. That's a contract position. And the candidate was engaged as per Executive Council Minutes 60 of February 2016. Same division, Aloy Westfield, personal assistant, qualifications with CXC O levels, salary 8,400, $1,800 allowance, contract. Again, this person was engaged in accordance with Executive Council Minutes 60 of February 2016. And for those who are looking and are unsure what that means, it means that in 2016, the Tobago House of Assembly took a decision that there will be some level of personal staff attached to every line secretary, and these are standard, the salaries are standard, and the salaries were determined since 2016 in accordance to Executive Council Minute 60 of 2016. Natalie Joseph Douglas, same division, she is the personal secretary. That salary is $6,300. Contract, the candidate was engaged in accordance with Executive Council Minute 60 of February 2016. Ansel Joe Field, personal chauffeur, valid driver's permit is the requirement based on law. Contract based on Executive Council Minute 60 of February 2016. Orson Thorne, personal assistant to the secretary, well, to the assistant secretary, sorry, and that is Mr. Tom has a master's in business administration, $8,400, again standard, $1,800 allowance, contract engaged in accordance with Executive Council Minute 60 of February 2016. Kalisha Parks, personal secretary to the assistant secretary, CXC O-levels and certificate in legal studies, $6,300, again standard as per engagement in accordance with Executive Council Minute 60 of February 2016. In the Office of the Chief Secretary, we have Tafara Smith, Information and Communication Officer with TEMA, Personal Certificate Course and Diploma, $8,500, allowance $1,200, and this position was advertised and candidate interviewed and was successful. Also in the Office of the Chief Secretary, Isaiah Jackson, Network Specialist, BSc in Computing and Certificate Courses, $13,400, allowance $1,200. Contract position was advertised and candidate interviewed. Office of the Chief Secretary, Elisa Clark, BOA 1, Procurement Control Office, Associate Degree in Culinary Arts, $5,150, and that's short-term employment. Candidate applied, was interviewed, and selected. Office of the Chief Secretary, Esther Balfour, Clerk Typist, Human Resource Department, Diploma and Certificate level courses, $5,188, short-term. Candidate applied, was interviewed, and selected. And if you did not hear any personal staff for the Chief Secretary in the Office of the Chief Secretary, is because I am yet to hire those personal staff in accordance with EC Minute 60 of February 2016 in OCS. In the Division of Finance, Trade and the Economy, we have Dwayne Nurse, personal assistant, Bachelor's of Science degree in Environmental Natural Resources Management, $8,400, $1,800, that's contract. And this candidate was engaged in accordance with CPO Circular PD 10-143, Volume 4, dated May 23, 2013. Also in that division, and I want to pause here for a little bit, Anselm Richards, Chief Technical Advisor to the Division of Finance, Trade and Economy, both a master's and a Bachelor of Science degree in Economics, $35,000, allowance $7,500, contract, and he was hired in the same manner that the minority leader was not so long ago in the Division of Health, and the minority councillor was when she was management accountant, determined by way of experience and education. And additionally, this became much needed in the division because we had an issue in the division with getting timely and accurate information from some members of staff whose allegiance lied elsewhere. In fact, at this present moment, thanks to efforts of the administrator, We even had to treat with issues of financial statements and reports of the division not being left in the division when a certain worker in the division who was hired in the same manner as Mr. Richards left, deleted all of the government files from the government computer, and until a decision was made to go to lawyers and to seek a legal redress, another contract officer was called off-site and given a flash drive clandestinely. And because of that kind of attitude, we needed somebody like Anselm Richards to be able to organize data coming to the division to ensure that they are accurate. And by the way, let me add, Madam Presiding Officer, right now we are still exploring legal options, including against the former secretary for the division, who still has the government laptop and iPad in his possession and has refused to return them to the division, and documents belonging to the division are presumably gone with such. We will be putting a stop to that kind of madness. Let me also indicate that at the Division of Finance, Trade and Economy, I am yet to hire, in accordance to EC Minute 60 of February 2016, personal staff, which means I am yet to have a personal secretary, I'm yet to have a personal advisor, and those staff associated with EC Minute 60 of 2016. In the Division of Tourism, Culture, Antiquities, and Transportation, we have Curtis Joseph, personal assistant to the secretary, certificate in arts and science at UWI, standard 8,400, 1,800, contract, candidate engaged in accordance with CPO Circular PD 10143, Volume 4, dated May 23rd, 2013. Marvin Phillips, personal secretary to the secretary, CXCO levels, 6,300, contract, standard as per the same circular. Personal assistant to the secretary, Renata Murray, to the assistant secretary, Renata Murray, associate degree and certificate level education, $8,400 allowance, 1,800 allowance as per same circular. Maxine Jack, personal assistant to the assistant secretary, Bachelor of Education, Early Childhood Care and Education, $6,300 contract as per the same circular. Coris Archer Kwashinansis, advisor to the secretary, Masters in International Development, Bachelor of Science degree in Media and Communication, 19,400, allowance 2,700 as per the same circular. Food Security, Natural Resources, and the Environment and Sustainable Development, Kidel Kerr, advisor to the secretary, Bachelors of Science in Environmental and Natural Resource Management and Tropical Landscaping, 19,400, allowance 2,700, contract as per the same circular. Abigail Warner, personal assistant to the secretary, Bachelor of Arts in Business Management, 8,400, salary 1,800 allowance, contract as per the same circular. Personal secretary to the secretary, Elisa James, Bachelor of Science in Biology, $6,300 contract as per the same circular. Nicoya Douglas, personal assistant to the assistant secretary, Diploma in Project Management, $8,400, $1,800 as per the same circular. Giselle Benjamin, personal assistant to the assistant secretary, and Giselle Benjamin is a doctor of veterinary medicine and a diploma in animal health production and veterinary public health, and the salary $6,300, contract as per this circular. Also in that division, Kern Duncan, carpenter, grade 2, group C, $288 per day, daily rated worker. Dondre Dimas, motor vehicle operator, $252 per day, daily rated worker. And Roy Devines, handyman, $244 per day, daily rated worker. Kalon Edwards handyman, $244 per day, daily rated worker. Kylan Kwashi handyman, $244 per day, daily rated worker. Ozzy Williams handyman, $244 per day, daily rated worker. Shaquille Jerry, tree climber, $244 per day, daily rated worker. Dwayne Joseph, semi-skilled laborer, $244 per day, daily rated worker. Monique Cooper, sanitation man, $235 per day, daily rated worker. Jason Stanley, male laborer, $235 per day, daily rated worker. Nylon Thomas, male laborer, $235 per day, daily rated worker. Orel Cooper, male laborer, $235 per day, daily rated worker. Byron Clark, $235 per day, daily rated worker. Tayshawn Broom, $235 per day, daily rated worker. Rayan Adams, female laborer, $235 per day, daily rated worker. Rodney Shangi, break shift watchman,
Member for Palatine, answer me. Member for Darrell Springwim.
Madam Presiding Officer, which in the interest of time, could we have the rest of the answer in writing?
Chief Secretary, member for Palatine, answer me. You have approximately 14 more minutes to your time, and we have additional questions.
I will continue to read therefore.
Continue.
It was asked for oral response, and I'll give oral response.
Continue.
You don't get to pick and choose when you're misguided. Devon Bailey, break shift watchman, $244 per day, daily rated worker. And let me say thanks for this question. Because of this question, the line secretaries now know that people were employed in their division
member
as daily
for
rated
Darrell
worker.
Springwim. Please allow member for Palatine and Sumi to finish its contribution. Thank you. Continue.
Thank you. And as per the standing orders, you also don't get to dictate the answers you get. Division of Education, Research and Technology, and Natasha Second, advisor to the Secretary, Masters in Business Administration, MSc in Education, Diploma, 19,000, Diploma in Education as well, 19,400, 2,700 contract as per the circular for personal staff. Kathy Charles John, personal assistant to the Secretary, certificate in supervisory management, certificate in sales and marketing, 8,400, salary 1,800, allowance, contract. Jamaica Thorm, personal secretary to the Secretary, certificate in childhood education, 6,300, contract as per the same circular. Jabari Carrington, personal chauffeur to the Secretary, 10 years experience as a light vehicle driver, $4,700, salary, $2,785 as per the circular. Kristen Cunningham, personal assistant to the Assistant Secretary, Associate Degree, $8,400, $1,800, allowance, contract as per the same circular. Personal Secretary to the Assistant Secretary, Zachariah Haynes, $6,300, contract as per the same circular. In the Division of Health, Wellness and Social Protection, Jason Nancis, advisor to the Secretary, BSc in Business Administration, $19,400, salary, $2,700, allowance, contract as per the circular for personal staff. Kershel Elliott, personal assistant to the Assistant Secretary, certificate in practical accounting and CXC O levels, $8,400, $1,800, contract as per the same circular. Adonis Edwards, personal assistant to the Secretary, BSc Behavioral Science, $8,400, $1,800 allowance, contract as per the same circular. Karen Moore Nicholson, liaison officer, registered nurse, $12,882, $2,000 contract. As per the circular, personal chauffeur, Renison Rogers, $4,700 salary, $2,785 allowance. Ayana Philip, communication assistant, AB diploma, $8,197, $2,000 short-term employment. Andel Adams, contact tracer, enrolled nursing assistant, $3,000. Aurora Bissoon, contract tracer, enrolled nursing assistant, $3,000. Michelle Boris Welch, contact tracer, enrolled nursing assistant, $3,000. Janelle Cox, contact tracer, enrolled nursing assistant, $3,000. Nadine Dinoon Not, contact tracer, enrolled nursing assistant, $3,000. Shenkwa Deslin, contact tracer, enrolled nursing assistant, $3,000. Ayana Phil Edwards, contact tracer, enrolled nursing assistant, $3,000. Seth Elias, contact tracer, enrolled nursing assistant, $3,000. Enrolled nursing assistant, $3,000. Avion Jack Balfour, contact tracer, enrolled nursing assistant, $3,000. Denel Jarrett, contact tracer, enrolled nursing assistant, $3,000. Camille Nanhu, contact tracer, enrolled nursing assistant, $3,000. Kerryanne Nelson, contact tracer, enrolled nursing assistant, $3,000. Denicia Ramsey, contact tracer, enrolled nursing assistant, $3,000. Tashiana Singh, contact tracer, enrolled nursing assistant, $3,000. Carissa Slater, contact tracer, enrolled nursing assistant, $3,000. Shireen Smart, contact tracer, enrolled nursing assistant, $3,000. Regine Sawyer, contact tracer, enrolled nursing assistant, $3,000. Kadisha Stanley, contact tracer, enrolled nursing assistant, $3,000. Akela Job Trotman, contact tracer, enrolled nursing assistant, $3,000. Kathisia Wallace, contact tracer, enrolled nursing assistant, $3,000. Gabrielle Yearwood, contact tracer, enrolled nursing assistant, $3,000. Sorry, contact tracers, that your measly salary and name is in the public. The minority leader needed to know orally, so I presented as required by law. Settlements, urban renewal, and public utilities. Anson McDonald, the advisor to the secretary, teaching diploma, diploma in labor studies, diploma in technical studies and education, $19,400, $2,700. Contract as per the circular for personal staff for secretaries. Personal assistant to the secretary, Giselle Small, Masters in Business Administration, BA in Political Science and Economics, $8,400 salary, $1,800 allowance. Contract as per the same circular. Lorraine Forbes, personal secretary to the assistant secretary, CXC O levels, $6,300. Contract as per the same circular. Joanna Stanley, office support assistant, advanced and ordinary levels, $5,100. Contract. Candidate applied, was interviewed and selected. So, in sports and youth affairs, Shanique Melville, BOA1, BSc in Behavioral Science, $5,150. Short-term employment. Assistant Accounts Officer, Certified Accounting Technician, $8,114. Short-term employment. Project Assistant, Junior Builder Course, Engineering Technician Course, $6,349. Short-term employment. Gloria Martin, Project Assistant, Associate Degree, $6,449. Short-term employment. Renicia Guy, BOA1, CXC O levels, $5,150. Infrastructure, quarries, and the urban development. Philip Herilal, Director of Project Management, $24,000, $2,500 allowance. Short-term employment. Mark Cunningham, Quantity Surveyor, $16,000, $2,000 allowance. Short-term employment. Morinke Adekale, Master Scheduler, $16,000, 2,000 allowance, short-term employment. Shiva Alexander, Procurement Manager, 15,900, 2,500 on short-term employment. Donnell Franklin, Project Manager, $18,000, salary 2,000 allowance, short-term employment. And short-term here is 3 months in the first instance. Rachel Trotman, Project Manager, $18,000, 2,000 allowance, short-term employment. Malika Peters, Project Control Officer, $11,000 salary, 1,500 allowance. Rondell George, Equipment Rental Officer.
Member for palliative care. As per Standing Order 27, you had 20 minutes in which to present, to answer your question, sorry. You have 5 minutes remaining from that 20 minutes.
Sure, not a problem. I'll finish in time. Keelan James Elliott, Personal Secretary to the Secretary, $6,300, contract as per the circular for personal staff to the Secretary. Ashwin Thomas James, Personal Assistant to the Secretary, $8,400, salary $1,800, allowance, contract as per the same circular. Aliyah Holder, Personal Secretary to the Assistant Secretary, $6,300, contract as per the circular for staffing for secretaries. Collis Brown, Advisor to the Secretary, $19,400, salary allowance $2,700, contract as per the same circular. Dr. Ellis Boris, Technical Advisor in the division to the division, $25,000, contract for a period of just 1 year. The total monthly cost of the new employment for the detailed area listed is $922,578. Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. If there's time for other questions, if not, I'll be happy to answer the other questions publicly.
Minority Leader. Go ahead.
I want to thank the Chief Secretary for confirming my suspicion that the administration to which he leads are in fact in breach of the law when it comes to the equal opportunity of all Tobagonians to access employment on contract, because the process is contract employment is to be advertised.
Minority Leader, is this a supplemental question?
Yes, Madam.
Can you ask the question, please?
Why is this current administration engaging in a process that does not allow every Tobagonian with the requisite skill to apply for the positions?
Chief Secretary.
Madam Presiding Officer, allow me to answer that question with a question.
You have 2 minutes.
When the Minority Leader was hired by the former Secretary for Health, Mrs. Davison Celestine, without being interviewed and on contract, why wasn't the rest of Tobago allowed this equal opportunity? And when the Minority Councillor was hired in the Division of Finance as a management accountant without a single interview, just handpicked and hired, why wasn't the rest of Tobago given similar opportunity? Madam Presiding Officer, I will manage this government in keeping with the law. Personal staff does not require interview based on the law, and secondly, you can hire people on short term, which is 3 months, to stop a gap on contract without prior interview, and the Minority Leader is well aware of that.
Minority Leader, we have 1 more minute before we wrap up.
Officer, on a point of clarification, I, Kelvon Morris, was never hired on contract without an interview.
Is this a question to the Chief Secretary? Please ask a question.
Madam Presiding Officer, the Chief Secretary in his presentation confirmed to us that persons were engaged on contract without advertisement, and I need him to explain that.
Chief Secretary, can you do that in the next 30 seconds?
I will not allow Tobago to suffer through that foolishness. Tobagonians are well aware that the procedure that we use is not strange and was used before. Additionally, the 100 people on CPEP, the hundreds hired to win an election, were done so last year without interview, without putting it into the public in hopes of winning an election. We will hire competent Tobagonians to fill the gaps in order to ensure delivery of the mandate to which we were given.
Thank you. Clerk? Before we proceed, according to Standing Order 27, the Chief Secretary's question had a time limit of 20 minutes, which we have since exhausted. I know that we had additional questions posed by the minority leader for the Chief Secretary. This could be deferred to the next Chief Secretary sitting, which is in the next 4 months.
Madam Presiding Officer, can I beg to move a motion that we waive that standing order to allow the response to all of the questions that's on the order paper today, please? Can one of my members stand and second that motion, please?
Madam Presiding Officer, I beg to move that we second the motion for all the questions on the order paper of the 4th sitting to be questioned and responded to today.
Motion granted. Minority Leader. Sorry, let's put this to vote for the House. The question is that the standing order be moved or waived in order for the Chief Secretary to complete the questions posed by the minority leader. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any against? Minority Leader, you can continue.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. As it relates to retreats held across the divisions of the Tobago House of Assembly, post December 6, 2021, will the Chief Secretary please provide the following? A, which divisions and agencies of the Tobago House of Assembly have held retreats post December 6, 2021? B, what is the breakdown of the costs incurred to the Assembly to host these retreats, including the rental cost of the venue? And C, what was the procurement process engaged in the selection of the venue to host these various retreats?
Chief Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. Upon coming into office on December 6, 2021, December 9th, 2021, 2 divisions held retreats. The Office of the Chief Secretary held a retreat which catered for all of the new members of the House on the majority side, and that's all 14 of us, in addition to the 3 councillors. That retreat was held at Rovenel's Resort. We had 3 hotels providing us with quotations to the entities. They were Magdalena Grand Hotel at a cost of $226,868.08. Mount Irvin Hotel, $291,034.62. Rovenel's Resort, $137,850. Naturally, we went with the cheapest, which was Rovenel's at $137,850. the total cost of that retreat came up to $223,894.88 was expended for the retreat. And that's inclusive of I gave you the price for accommodation, meals and decor. We had supplemental bandwidth capacity from the mobile, $2,248.88. Rental of screens, multimedia microphones, PA system, $29,700. Sip and paint evening, $6,000. And for the facilitators, we had broken down by facilitators, Odyssey Consult Inc. Limited, $6,700. Binley Benjamin, $20,000. Dr. Lena Williams, $1,000. Lenore Dorset, $3,700. And we also had to pay Caribbean Airlines return flight of 3 facilitators, $900 in total. For the other division of Food Security, Natural Resources, the Environment and Sustainable Development, they had a 2-day retreat. This was not a sleeping retreat, but day retreat. And the retreat was aimed at breaking down the policy mandate for the division with the division heads. And they sent out requests from 4 enterprises. They got no response from Tropicus Beach Hotel Resort. Ravenels gave them a cost of $36,300. Mount Irving Bay Hotel gave a cost of $49,493.25. Magdalena Grand Beach and Gold Resort gave them a quotation of $51,999.03. They went with Ravenel's Resort at $36,300.
Minority Leader.
As it relates to the renovation of the official residence of the Chief Secretary, located at Lowlands, Tobago, will the Chief Secretary please provide the following? What is the detailed scope of works approved by the Executive Council? What is the breakdown of the total cost as per the scope of works outlined? And C, what is the cost to purchase and install a very fancy jacuzzi at the residence?
Chief Secretary.
Yes, Madam Presiding Officer, and I am elated to answer this question because I know the Minority Leader has been getting his information from his fake news agents online. And so I've been seeing figures floating around that I don't know anything about, but I must note that I asked for permission to show photos in the house as per required by the standing orders, and I'm happy that we are also going live, and I'll ask for these photos to be queued accordingly on the monitors so you can see the photos of what we inherited as the Chief Secretary's residence and what we did and the cost for what we did. So first up, the photos you see are of the driveway. For some reason, it wasn't properly done, and it resulted in every time a vehicle or an individual pass in the area, tar was getting into the garage area and into the residence itself, which meant that the staff at property had to keep paying to refinish the wooden floors, paying to clean tar off the tiles inside. And so a request was made to the Division of Works that is responsible for Government Quarters number 25. This is Government Quarters number 25. To repair the driveway, I will give the cost shortly. The next photo will show the awnings around the house. It will show that all the brackets holding up the awnings and parts of the awning is severely rusted. You can cue the photo, please. The awning is severely rusted out. That is yet to be fixed. So I pray God that it doesn't drop on anybody's head. especially my wife's head while we are there, because the state will have to compensate me for this. Next set of photos I would like to show will be of some of the air conditioning units at the residence. Can we cue those photos, please? We had AC units that were all rusted out. We have about 2 different photos of AC units rusted out. And so air conditions had to be replaced, in particular the air conditions attached to the maid quarters. I can't be in cold breeze, and those that come to work for less salary than me be uncomfortable. It must be equality across the board. Next photo I wish to show the house will be of the rusted out burglar-proof gate at the home office, which is adjoining to the master bedroom where my wife and I sleep. And this, I'm told, was rusted out like this through several chief secretaries. So this burglar-proof had to be replaced. In fact, it was taken down and replaced with an electronic keycard system. I will share the cost in a short while. That will allow for security without putting up a burglar proofing that will naturally succumb to the elements of the Atlantic in that area. Next photo will be of the office there at the residence. And at the office, in that photo, you will see where the legs of the table all went out, the drawers couldn't close properly, there was a patch in the arm of the chair, and other breakage within the furniture. The chairs were reupholstered as opposed to the new ones being purchased, and a new table was procured. I'll give the cost in a short while. Next up, we have photos of the infamous tub that Commerce and Facebook said we spent $100,000 on. In the master bedroom, the top fixtures were broken, and efforts were made to return to the supplier to get the fixtures, and could not get the fixtures, so a replacement tub had to be purchased. Additionally, in that photo, you will also see where at some point we had to patch in a different color, a different type of tile in the background to treat with a plumbing fix. And it must be known that when this tub was moved out, some more tiles had to be replaced because we could not get back the exact size of tub as was there previously. Next photo we will show will be of the flag poles, and one of the flag poles prior to arrival was already down. So in contravention of all protocols, the flags were being hoisted in a manner that contravenes the protocols, because one of the flag poles fell down. And if you look at the base of the flag poles in one of the photos, you will see where the bolts were rusted out from the existing flag poles. So we needed to replace the bolts and replace the flag poles. Next up, the more infamous pool that Commerce and Facebook said we spent $5 million on. I'll give the real cost. The pool, we had to make a decision between cleaning the pool and having to change the tiles, or leaving the pool as is. We cleaned the pool, and we procured the exact blue mosaic tiles and replaced only the tiles that fell out due to the cleaning, because this is a significant backup of calcium and limestone and so on. And we also procured extra blue tiles. So in the future, all that needs to happen is just replace the tiles that drop out in the process of cleaning. Additionally, next photo I want to show some of the furniture around the residence. The pool furniture, you can see they were all bent out of shape, washed out and faded. Next, I will show the gate at the entrance. Next photo will be the gate at the entrance, some lattice work that were all busted up, and one of the internal showers where the wall was busted up, the shower head was falling off. I will let you know, Madam Presiding Officer, the gate is still not fixed. Up to yesterday, up to last night upon arrival, the security had to come out and push the gate, so I could be there late at night, And it will mean that anybody, gunman, anybody could hold us up at the gate because the automatic system is not working and the base of the gate is rusting out. The shower was repaired, the lattice work was repaired. I will give the cost of that. And then I have 2 other sets of photos of some of the furnishings in the residence. We have the living room chair. Can we show it, please? Living room chair, all tattered up, ripped up, burst up. And so we had to replace the living room chair. We had an upholsterer came and fixed the dining room chairs, but we could not save the living room chairs. Next slide will show some other furniture. I don't know who was residing here and what they were doing with the furniture. But this is the state of the furniture. We met there, all busted up, sponge coming out of the chair, pea stains on the furniture. And I don't know about you, Madam Presiding Officer, but where I live in Speyside, my father does upholstery, and none of our furniture, as poor as we may be, they don't look like this. And so I prefer to live in Speyside with my proper furniture than live in this. But as the case is, this is government quarters number 25. It does not belong to Farley Chavez Augustine. It belongs to the people of Tobago. And sadly, like the other government quarters, they were not managed properly, were not maintained properly. I will let you know, as per your question, the Executive Council does not have to approve a scope of work for any government quarters. Government quarters are to be maintained under budget line item 21, repairs and maintenance of buildings. And for this fiscal year, under repairs and maintenance of buildings, the fiscal allocation is $3.2 million. Simply put, the cost was service under what was estimated for and budgeted and approved by the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago. The total cost, and allow me to give you a breakdown of the total cost by cost of the work, so that we're transparent and we're very, very clear in what they are. The stone facade exterior restoration, that came in at a cost of $9,406.94. To fix planks on balcony step, that was $547. The flagpole restoration and the installation of a new one, total $8,434.13. The walkway from the security booth to the main house, paint, $300. Pool cleaning and mosaic tile replacement, a total of $17,160. Get the cost correct. There was no $5 million there. Replacement of non-functioning pool lights, $525. Replacement of damaged lattice work, $4,357.50. Cleaning tiles at the portico, $500. Cleaning fixtures and fittings smudged with paint, $120. The resheeting of the driveway, I'll give you the cost one time. That is $78,125.67, and that was done in-house by the division. Replacement of all the weathered hinges around the sunroom, all were rusted out, sorry. The total cost, $2,875.20. Replacement of all the weathered door handles. They were all rusted out and the locks were not working. And the total cost was also $2,875.20. AC repairs and installation, $10,327.50. Cleaning, keypad security door for the study or the home office is $6,546. The office desk, the new one is $4,525. the glazing work, mirrors, bathroom enclosures in all the bathroom, and all the plumbing fixtures that were changed out. Total $83,216.25. Installation of new shower mixer in the master bath, and that is the thing with the dial that it turn for the shower on top or the pipe down below. That is $3,806.88. The master bath tub replacement. Let me pause here so that people will know it's not any $100,000, as the minority leader friends are telling him. The master bath tub replacement and installation totaled $12,370.52. The replacement of the tiles in the master bathroom, eventually we had to replace all the surrounding wall tiles, but we left the floor tiles and we tried to patch in a similar floor tile in the area where some were missing, but the replacement of tiles total $12,508.27. Built-in cabinetry for microwave and mini fridge in the master bedroom, that is $3,285. URP did that, by the way. Shelving in the master walk-in closet for towels and sheets, that was also done by URP at a cost of $500. Transport from Trinidad to site for Trinidad purchases, $6,062.50. The refinishing of the living room floor, that is wooden floor, to be sanded, patched where it needs to be patched, and restained, that's $21,870.40. Repainting of external side to the main entrance door, $427.50. Repair chips to bed frame and door. We repaired the beds in the other rooms, but we changed out the bed in the master bedroom because I'm not sleeping on the same bed the former Chief Secretary slept on. Those repairs total $50 for the other beds. And I will tell you, to date, the Division of Infrastructure and Urban Development spent $212,319.39 in the repairs, well below a quarter of what is in the budget to treat with repairs and maintenance of buildings with regards to government quarters. I will let this House also know that there are several other things to be done. I mentioned the awning, not yet done. There was also a need to do an attachment between the main house and the maid quarters, so one doesn't have to go through rain to get to where the laundry is. Not yet done. The wash sinks inside of the washroom that have all decayed, those concrete sinks, not yet done. The fencing, the back fencing around the perimeter that the security services have advised is way too low, and that some neighbors' cows butt in, not yet repaired or replaced. We haven't even considered a secondary exit. I will also let you know that none of the camera systems at the residence none of them are working, not one of them at all working. And so, just like any other government quarters, works will take its dead time to do whatever it does. And it may get done this year, it may get done 20 years from now, but that is in true works fashion. It is government quarters number 25, and it will be treated with just like any other government quarters, I guess.
Minority Leader.
Chief Secretary, notwithstanding your very skillful ability to deflect from the questions asked, I am still yet to hear whether any works, any of the scope of work was outsourced and what was the procurement process to treat with that.
Chief Secretary.
Madam Presiding Officer, none of the questions asked by the minority leader on the order paper asked me to differentiate between what was outsourced and what was done internally. The last time I checked, I could read, and I went to Bishop's High School, and I am certain the minority leader was in a class somewhere next to me. Perhaps not in my class, but he was in a class somewhere next to me. And none of the questions he asked on the order paper asked for that. But let me attempt to help him in terms of what was done internally and what was outsourced. Right. So, the stone facade exterior restoration, outsourced. Fixing of the planks on the balcony, done internally by works. Flagpoles, done internally by works. The walkway from the security booth to the main house, done internally by works. The pool cleaning and mosaic tile replacement, outsourced. The lights in the pool, done by works. The replacement of the lattice work, done by works. The cleaning of tiles in the portico, that was done by the same folks that did the pool. The cleaning of fixtures, smudged by paint, done by works. Driveway, done by works. All the weathered hinges and door handles, those were outsourced. The AC repairs, done by works. The security keypad, outsourced. The office desk was by a local supplier. The glazing work in the bathrooms, the changing of the mirrors, the bathroom enclosures, the fixtures, those were all outsourced. The shower mixture, that was installed by works. The tub, the infamous tub, was installed by works. The replacement of tiles in the bathroom was done by works. The built-in cabinetry for the microwave and mini refrigerator, that was done by works. Shelving in the master closet, that was done by works. The transportation between the islands to bring stuff procured in Trinidad was outsourced. The refinishing of the living room floor, that's the wooden floors, that was outsourced. The repainting of the external side of the main entrance door, that was done by works. The dining room table, I did not mention it before because no cost was attached to that in the actual scope sent across this morning by engineer Mr. Martin. But I will let you know that the goodly folks at URP, it isn't coffins alone that they can build. They built a fantastic and sturdy dining room table, well polished at no cost. The repair chips to bed frame and doors, that was done by works. The reconstruction of shelving.
Member for Darrell Spring, you are interrupting. Now I understand your enthusiasm. However, you ask the question, allow the Chief Secretary to answer, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, and the repair to chips to the bed frame and the door, that too was done by works. So you can see the majority was done by works, and because that was not an original question on the order paper, I did not ask the engineer at works who did the work, Mr. Martin, to provide that information in terms of the procurement process. But what I did was to simply send the question as is down to works, and they supply the responses that I shared today.
Minority Councillor.
As it relates to overseas travel of public officials of the Tobago House of Assembly, will the Chief Secretary please provide the following? A, what is the nature, cost, and date of overseas travel per division? And B, who are the officers who traveled and the breakdown of the cost to fund each officer outlining the cost of airfare, per diem, and any other payment incurred.
Thank you
Chief
very-
Secretary.
Thank you very much, Madam Presiding Officer. Right, to date, there were only two international travel engagements for this Executive Council. I'll start with the trip to Dubai, because that was made famous with a lot of misinformation. Upon entering office, we met a request to participate in the Dubai Global or International Exposition. And that was an expo that lasted in excess of 150 days. Tobago, prior to us coming into office, had already procured and sent tokens and display items to Dubai to be part of the national display there. Upon entering office, we met a request for a team of 7 officers to go to Dubai, and that would have included the then Secretary for Community Development and the Chief Secretary. The Chief Secretary was being paid for, or should have been paid for totally by the government of Dubai, and the head of BDU, she was partially paid part of her per diem, up to part of her per diem paid by the government of Dubai, and Mr. Lewis, the third person we sent, because we downsized the team and only sent 3, we were to cover his accommodation and his movement to Dubai. I have already made it public that the THA supplied the Ministry of Trade and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs with the information pertaining to the 3 individuals that were expected to represent Tobago at this exposition. And that's 3 out of a contingent of 16 on that VIP list. We indicated to them very early the time period in which we wanted to travel and be in Dubai and to be part of the presentation on the 10th of March and our country day on the 11th of March. We indicated that our team needed to travel between March 4th to the 14th of March. On March 4th, no ticket, no visa was forthcoming. On March 5th, we got the visa for Mrs. Baptiste, but no ticket. On March 6th, Deputy Chief Secretary, who I delegated to attend in my place, got his visa. The Executive Council took a decision, notwithstanding the original mandate that the government of Dubai would pay for the cost. We will purchase their tickets to get across to Dubai, and the government of Dubai will take care of the rest while they are there on the ground. I can tell you, for the Deputy Chief Secretary, the cost was $96,212.63, and that's for a ticket 3 hours before the departure of the flight. So I don't need to explain to Tobagonians how those last-minute ticket costs will be. Per diem total is $31,409.63, and that is in accordance with the per diem requirements of the law. With Mrs. Baptiste, the airfare $15,594.63. For Mr. Lewis, for whom we had to pay everything except for part of the accommodation, his per diem was $31,660.91, and the ticket was $35,256. Second engagement happened between February 22nd to the 27th to the annual Food Network and Cooking South Beach Wine and Food Festival out of Miami, Florida. And on this trip, the team held negotiations with Global X Airline. I'm surprised the Secretary did not talk about Global X. We met a prior request from Global X, and we have been able to successfully renegotiate that agreement, which will, when it materializes, result in Tobago not having to pay for any empty seats on that flight to Tobago. Additionally, they started speaking to some other small independent airlines for flights out of Germany and the Scandinavian region while there. Also from this trip, there is a preliminary agreement for there to be a twinning of FIU, Florida International University, and the Tobago Hospitality Tourism Institute. That is performance, if you ask me, to allow for some of FIU courses to be taught locally in the Tobago space. And already a second meeting was held 3 weeks ago, and that meeting 3 weeks ago was held virtually with the organizers and the sponsors of the annual Food Network and Cooking South Beach Wine and Food Festival. To do what? Guess what? To bring that festival, a similar version of that festival, to Tobago next year, given that Trinidad and Tobago is the most southerly located Caribbean island territory in the region. And the cost for that trip, we had the Deputy Chief Secretary attending, and his per diem was $29,395.50. Airfare, $10,492. The Secretary for Tourism, Culture, Antiquities and Transportation, per diem $19,810. Airfare, $8,700. The advisor to the Secretary, Mrs. A.Q. Nancy's, per diem $15,260. Airfare, $3,100. The CEO of THTI, Dr. Shepard, $15,260. Airfare, $3,100. The CEO of the Tobago Festivals Commission Limited, per diem $15,260. Airfare, $3,100. And that constituted the 2 trips that this executive has made to date.
Minority Councillor.
Follow-up, Madam Presiding Officer. Just to confirm, the Chief Secretary indicated that the Tobago delegation would have left, or they would have been advised that they would want to leave between the 4th and the 14th. So my follow-up question to the Chief Secretary is, what was the reason for the THA delegation traveling ahead of the national delegation, especially in light that this trip was sponsored for 3 nights? Is there any specific reason why the THA delegation needed to travel between the period that he would have indicated?
Chief Secretary.
Oh yes, thank you. Madam Presiding Officer, this was a national trip. And for a national trip to an exposition that lasted well over 150 days, being led by the Trinidad and Tobago High Commissioner to London, there was no Tobagonian or no Tobago participation prior to Deputy Chief Secretary Duke and the team leaving. So there were trainees that went before and returned, keep going and coming, and there are trainees that remained there after this delegation. And the Executive Council felt that it could not be reasonable for there to be a national delegation, a national cultural delegation as well. No Tobagonia, no THA interest in the national cultural delegation, no THA or Tobago reps prior to going, that we needed to give them at least 1 week so that they can have engagements with other players in the space, so that they do more than go and display Tobago goods, so that they can go and seek out other businesses, including but not limited to possible foreign direct investments for Tobago. And that was the reason why we added some additional days to the national VIP delegation, because we weren't just sending a VIP delegation. What we were sending was a delegation to actually represent Tobago and to seek Tobago's interests in a short period of time, while Trinidad was seeking their own interests for hundreds of days.
Minority Councillor.
Madam Presiding Officer, as it relates to the establishment of the Office of the Deputy Chief Secretary, will the Chief Secretary please indicate the following? A, what are the approved positions of the establishment of this new standalone Office of the Deputy Chief Secretary? B, what are the positions filled thus far? The names of the individuals, their qualifications, their remuneration, and status of employment, be it short-term, contract, permanent, or daily paid. And C, what is the recruitment process used to engage each officer?
Chief Secretary.
Thank you very much, Madam Presiding Officer. This Office of the Deputy Chief Secretary is not new. There has always been an Office of the Deputy Chief Secretary as per the law that says that an executive council consists of the Chief Secretary, one office, the Deputy Chief Secretary, 2 offices, and not more than 7 others. So it's not new at all. What is new is that it's a standalone division. And the MSU, Management Services Unit, they sat down and worked out the organizational structure for this new standalone division of the Deputy Chief Secretary. And in addition to the usual accounting officers that will be placed in that division, MSU recommended and the Executive Council approved the following 6 positions. 1, a Director of Legal Services. 2, a Director for Diaspora Relations. 3, a Director for Foreign Direct Investments. 4, a Director for Monitoring and Evaluation. 5, a Director for Energy and Sustainable Resources. And 6, a Business Operations Coordinator. To date, Madam Presiding Officer, none of these positions have been filled. To date, what we are working on right now is aligning the other divisions, which will see the workers related specifically with youth and sport joining their colleagues in community development, and the public servants that were there under the standalone division of youth and sport will then be joined by Deputy Chief Secretary Duke and his team, the 6 officers as I stated. When that office space arrangement is worked out, then Deputy Chief Secretary Duke will be allowed to hire his staff accordingly.
Request for leave to move the adjournment of the Assembly on definite matters of urgent public importance, statements by secretaries or assistant secretaries, personal explanations, introduction of bills, motions relating to the business or the sitting of the Assembly and moved by a secretary or assistant secretary, public business, executive council business, motion.
Chief Secretary, please be reminded that you have 40 minutes of speaking time to move the motion and 30 minutes of speaking time to wrap up at the end of the debate. To the other members presenting, you are given 30 minutes speaking time to present and an additional 10 minutes if requested by another member on your behalf. Chief Secretary, you may begin.
Thank you very much, Madam Presiding Officer. And just allow me a few seconds before getting started, just to consume some water, please. I think this is one of the most important motions brought to this House, perhaps over the last decade or so. And even in having, this motion is so important, Madam Presiding Officer, that former Chief Secretary, Mr. Charles, couldn't help himself but break his own rule and return to this honorable House. In fact, you may be unaware of the fact that Mr. Charles has not been into this august chamber for quite a while. How many years? From 2007, Mr. Charles has not returned to this House until this very day in March of 2022. And that is noteworthy, Madam Presiding Officer. Madam Presiding Officer, the motion I wish to present reads as follows. Whereas Section 25(1) of the Tobago House of Assembly Act 1996 provides as follows: without prejudice to Section 75(1) of the Constitution, the Assembly in relation to Tobago be responsible for the formulation and implementation of policy in respect of matters set out in the 5th schedule, and whereas Section 25(2) of the said Act empowers the Assembly to do all such acts and take all such steps as may be necessary for or incidental to the exercise of its powers or for the discharge of its duties. And whereas town and country planning is one of the matters set out in the 5th schedule as item number 15, and whereas the institutional structure has not been put in place to implement this function, be it resolved that this House authorize the Executive Council to take immediate steps to establish the institutional structure for the implementation of the town and country planning function by the Assembly in accordance with the Tobago House of Assembly Act of 1996. Madam Presiding Officer, one of the things that we campaigned on and we gave as a mandate pledge to the people of Tobago is that we will bring town and country planning function to the Assembly and to the people of Tobago. And so I am happy today. I am happy today that I have this opportunity to do just that, to signal to the people of Tobago, and by extension the people of Trinidad, and of course the government of Trinidad, I know they will be listening keenly, that the THA is ready to put on its big boy's clothes, its big man's clothes, and take up the function as delegated to it in the law. It is regrettable, Madam Presiding Officer, that Act 40 of 1996 gave us this authority, this executive authority. And between 1996 and 2001, some efforts were started to allow for the full functioning of town and country planning within the local space, in the Tobago space. In 2001, a wind of change came, and sometimes when new political parties take office, they're guilty of not continuing the good things and just throwing away everything. And so, in their zeal and perhaps hatred for the former Chief Secretary, they threw away everything with all the work done with town and country planning at the time and proceeded to allow Trinidad to rule over us with regards to tongue and country planning. To me, Madam Presiding Officer, this is an indictment. This is a sad reality. We cannot, on one hand, be making noise for greater autonomy and on the other hand, refuse to take up our functions as per the law. And this THA is signaling clearly that while we fight for greater autonomy, those fifth schedule matters belong to the people of Tobago, and we will carry out those functions with respect to the law. And let me signal one time that those seventh schedule matters that mandate that several public offices actually have offices in Tobago and deliver their function in Tobago, and they have not been doing so. I want to signal to all of you all who stick up down in Trinidad and not bringing the office up here as per law, that I will be writing you and instructing you as per the law to bring those offices to Tobago, or I will go to court and force them to come to Tobago. The THA must be respected. And one of the reasons why we spent a lot of time this morning talking about tub and tiles and lights and a driveway and whether or not the residents should look this way or not, or whether we should use our government quarters or not, or whether we should live with an awning hanging on by mossy threads or not, is because a group of people in Tobago has caused Tobagonians to not even respect the institution of the THA. This is not county council. This is not the THA of 1980, when not even the position of secretaries were legislated for, and when the clerk of the house was the top public servant on the island. This is a THA that got significantly devolved functions as per Act 40 of 1996. And as flawed as that act might be, we have to be grateful to former President, former Prime Minister, and former Chairman of the THA, Mr. A.N.R. Robinson, for bringing it to the House and ensuring that we got some updates. In fact, most of you public servants who might be listening and watching, most of you teachers, most of you working in the system, will not enjoy what you have today if the THA did not get significantly more devolved responsibilities. And so you must be grateful for that. The matter of tongue and country planning is an urgent one, Madam Presiding Officer. It's urgent because it is 21 going on 22 years late. It is urgent, Madam Presiding Officer, because Tobago's development, especially its infrastructural development, is still in the hands of strangers. I was inspired to place this in the PDP mandate, and the reason we call it a mandate and not a manifesto is because the things contained therein were things given to us by the people of Tobago as we engaged with them. And I engaged with a well-known Tobagonian, a well-known businessman, and he said to me, he said, Farley, when I was building this house, it was originally denied by tongue and country planning. In order to query it, I had to send the files to Trinidad, jump on a plane and go down Trinidad to convince Trinidadians who know nothing about with space that I could build this house where I want to build this house. And what is even more egregious than that is that we have a tongue and country planning unit being headed by someone on contract who should have been retired donkey years now, gone past the age, working age, long time, from Trinidad, heading our unit, telling us what to do, how to do it, and what we can't do, as determined by people down in Trinidad. Now, the law is clear that the Tobago House of Assembly should have as a function tongue and country planning. And I want to start by going into the Constitution of Trinidad and Tobago, so you will understand first and foremost why this function is rightfully the Tobago House of Assembly's function, and nobody can legally stop us from taking it. If you go to section 74 of the Constitution, section 74 of the Constitution of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago says, the executive authority of Trinidad and Tobago shall be vested in the president, and subject to this constitution may be exercised by him either directly or through officers subordinate to him. 74.2 says, without prejudice to the generality of subsection 1, which I just read, the supreme command of the armed forces of Trinidad and Tobago shall be vested in the president, and the exercise of this power shall be regulated by law. And then it goes to subsection 3, which is the most important part. Section 74, subsection 3, it says, nothing in this section shall prevent Parliament from conferring functions on persons or authorities other than the President. Let me read that again, Madam Presiding Officer. The Constitution of Trinidad and Tobago says that nothing in this section, in section 74, shall or can prevent the Parliament from conferring functions, as in government functions on persons or authorities other than the President. And so, Act 40 of 1996 was really an act of Parliament that sought to confer on the people of Tobago a function that ordinarily we will not have. Act 40 of 1996 was the Parliament saying, look, these set of functions, as identified by the 5th schedule, 33 initially, and about 3 others were scheduled later on, these functions, we are going to take them away from the Parliament, we are going to take them away from the President, and we are going to delegate it to the people of Tobago through an institution called the Tobago House of Assembly. And so, in essence, while the National Parliament retains its function for making policy, and policy is really lawmaking. I mean, we claim to be making policy in the THA, but without lawmaking ability, are we really making policy? Or are we just making demands? But policy is really through the act of making laws. And so, through the law that is Act 40 of 1996, we were delegated functions. The Parliament is still the only law-making body in the country. So how does the interplay between the THA and the central government, how is that supposed to work? Well, it means that for everything you see in the 5th schedule, where there is an accompanying act that says minister, it is not a minister or a ministry in Trinidad that is supposed to do it. It should be an equivalent line secretary or the Tobago House of Assembly that is supposed to do it. Because we are charged here with the responsibility based on section 74.3 of the Constitution, backed up by Act 40 of 1996, to carry out these functions. And so one of those functions, really and truly, is the function for town and country planning. Now, the matter for consideration, this matter for consideration was already carried to the Executive Council, and the Executive Council authorized moving this motion so that we can then move to the place of building out our town and country planning function. And let me say early up that this does not mean that we will set up our town and country planning function and just send home everybody that is working in the current town and country planning office in Tobago. What we will do is that we will subsume them into the functions as being delegated to the Tobago House of Assembly. The Assembly's authority is enshrined in the Constitution of Trinidad and Tobago by way of Chapter 11A, Section 141A, where it states inter alia that there shall be an assembly for Tobago to be called the Tobago House of Assembly, in this chapter referred to as the Assembly, and also 141B that says, subject to this constitution, the assembly shall have such powers and functions in relation to Tobago as may be prescribed, sorry. And those functions were prescribed in the 5th schedule. It amazes me that for this length of time that nobody thought it necessary to take up this function, and it might just be a case of sheer laziness. The powers and functions of the assembly mentioned in the Constitution are prescribed in the TH Act of 1996. Section 25(1) of the Act says, without prejudice to Section 75(1) of the Constitution, the assembly in relation to Tobago be responsible for the formulation and implementation of policy in respect of the matters set out in the 5th schedule. And as I stated before, town and country planning is item number 15 on that schedule. It further states in section 25(2) of the THA Act, for better performance of its functions, the assembly is hereby empowered to do all such acts and take all such steps as may be necessary for or incidental to the exercise of its power or the discharge of its duties. Town and country planning is one of those duties highlighted for us, and we are taking it up one by one. Two principal elements of land use planning are development planning and development control. Development planning entails the framing of a spatial development strategy and the land use plan, which aims to provide a uniform, effective, and comprehensive system of land use management and incorporates the use of spatial data, which is Geographic Information Systems, or GIS. The second component of planning function is development control. This element of the function deals with the control of land use and the regulation of the detailed aspects of physical development, and is an essential part of planning, as it is the prerequisite for orderly implementation of development plans of the citizenry, private and commercial entities alike. In the current dispensation, this is where the THA must become active, primarily through its public health and infrastructure departments. The planning department, however, oversees the process and sign off on the final approval. And while I'm at it, let me point out how crazy it was for Tobago to wake up a day and decide, because somebody said Germans were buying out all the lands in Tobago, that we will take the authority for foreign direct investments on our land and send it back to Trinidad and tell a minister in Trinidad, take your time, based on how you feel, you decide who foreigner could buy land in Tobago. The Tobagonians who decided that were not real Tobagonians. They were Papi Show Tobagonians, pseudo Tobagonians, because real Tobagonians understood in that moment and still understand that, one, the majority of the outsiders who are buying lands in Tobago are not foreigners, are Chinese. And guess what? They need no license. They need no approval from anybody. They could come and buy without you. And secondly, real Tobagonians also understood then and understand now that if we are to have a land licensing regime, and I think there must be some kind of regime so that there will be some controls. Don't get me wrong. I don't believe in a carte blanche arrangement for anybody to walk in from anywhere and buy. But that regime should and must be organized by the THA, not central government. Not central government. In fact, that's a dereliction of duty based on the law and should not have happened. It was ill-advised, but it has happened. And as I said, one by one, the THA will be taking up all of its functions that we have not taken up before. Currently, Madam Presiding Officer, the enforcement component of development control is shared between the Town and Country Planning Division and of the Ministry of Planning, not even THA, of the Ministry of Planning and the Tobago House of Assembly agencies, notably the Public Health Department and the Infrastructure Department. This Executive Council noted that and that's the one we passed a week ago, noted that the legal instrument established for carrying out the functions of Town and Country Planning is the Town and Country Planning Act 3501. But by THA Act of 1996, the Parliament has conferred on the people of Tobago through the THA the functions of Town and Country Planning in Tobago. It should not be any ministry doing that in Tobago. It should be the THA by law. The ministry doing that in Tobago is out of place and out of order legally, and we have to put a stop to that. The Executive Council also noted that in the past decade and a half, successive central government administrations have attempted to reform and enhance the legislation governing Town and Country Planning, resulting in the enactment of the Planning and Facilitation of Development Act, PAFD, in 2014. The PAFD takes cognizance of the statutory role and authority of the THA. The Planning and Facilitation of Development Act stipulates that the National Planning Authority, which is the principal organ of the PAFD Act, must consult with the THA in the performance of its functions. So the latest act that was done in 2014 recognizes the authority of the THA, but the THA, up until now, did not recognize its own authority. The Act recognizes that the authority of the Assembly and stipulates in Section 16 that the NPA shall not prepare development plans for Tobago, shall not determine applications for Tobago, and shall not discharge development controls in Tobago. So the 2014 Act, all of which is yet to be proclaimed, recognizes the authority of the THA. The THA apparently did not recognize its own authority. The full activation of this act remains outstanding 8 years after its enactment, and there is no known timeline for its implementation. And notwithstanding that fact, certain sections of the act were proclaimed in 2015. The sections proclaimed deal particularly with the establishment of the NPA, which is the administrative arm of the act. The transition phase to full proclamation of the PAFD Act involves a readiness assessment by municipal corporations, but these activities are currently being undertaken by the Assembly. In fact, on my first day in office, on the 13th of December, when I visited that PRDI building, I was shown an empty space, and I was told this is where the function of Town and Country Planning will come. Just an empty space, but nothing else, no computers, no desks, nothing else to do to carry out the function. And further to recognizing the THA as the authority for planning in Tobago, the PAFD Act restricts the Minister of Planning from authorizing the National Planning Authority to 1, determining applications for Tobago, to 2, discharging development control function in Tobago. And it should be noted that this section of the PAFD Act has not been proclaimed. There's nobody didn't proclaim it yet, but we do not need it to be proclaimed because the law is clear. Town and Country Planning as a function belongs to the THA, whether they proclaim this entire act or not. Accordingly, the Assembly, in its quest to give effect to the full implementation of Section 25 and the 5th Schedule of the Tobago House of Assembly Act 1996, as it relates to Town and Country Planning function, also relies on Section 74(3) of the Constitution that I read at the start of my presentation. To complete institutional structure, provisions for appeals from decisions of a regulatory authority is normally incorporated. It is a critical feature of any legislation that impacts citizens' right to the use of property. And I gave an anecdote of one Tobagonian who had to travel to Trinidad to make that query. And I tell you this today, Tobagonians, when this motion is passed, will be moving post haste to setting up town and country planning in Tobago. You will no longer have to interact whatsoever with Trinidad to get your approvals or to make your queries. Accordingly, as a prerequisite for full implementation of the town and country planning function, a number of actions outlined are required. One, there has to be the establishment of a physical planning unit within the Department of Planning, and an organizational structure was already done as advised by those with institutional knowledge. The transfer of archival and current information relative to all land use matters pertaining to Tobago from the Ministry of Planning to the Planning Department of the THA, and I don't suspect we will get any resistance from the Ministry of Planning to transfer those archived documents. If we do, I have courthouse closed and we'll be heading there. Thirdly, the establishment of a specifically appointed team to clear the backlog of unprocessed applications. And in a while, I will tell you why that is so and how some of the agencies have hundreds of applications languishing on their desks. Fourth, the consultation, revision, completion, and publication relative to the Tobago Spatial Development Strategy and Land Use Plan. Fifth, the automation of the application and the approval process for land use customized for Tobago, because we're going digital. We're not going with all this other paper thing. We're trying to make it digital and make it simpler while we are also doing this. Six, we have to have preparation of process for public review of complex types of application for land use. In other words, what we are saying is, once it is a complex sort of land use arrangement, the public must have a say. The public must be able to weigh in. The public must be able to go on our website and see this hotel that's being built, right? And you know, as I'm on that point, Madam Presiding Officer, I learned, not surprisingly so, after my first meeting last week with the entity that is to build in Marriott in Tobago, I learned from them that the whole plan, the whole proposal for Marriott, the whole decision for Marriott was made, and the principals in that business had not had a single conversation with the THA before it was announced and before it was assigned to them. I don't know what THA were running. Clearly, it was a puppy show in this house. And Mr. Charles had a right not to return since 2007 because we weren't doing the functions assigned to us. How can a major hotel development be procured for Tobago, done in Trinidad, and nobody had talked to the THA formally before it was awarded? That's not happening under my watch. That I can assure you, Madam Presiding Officer. Seventh, there must be the establishment of a community planning forum for rotational planning visits to communities to understand and promote community initiative and input, and to provide appropriate advice to communities on planning matters. 8, a proposal for a sustained communications process on planning matters. And 9, a motion such as this must be passed in this house in order to give it teeth and to give it the right to be actioned. Accordingly, Madam Presiding Officer, as the Chief Secretary, I'm also the Secretary for Planning. And that's why this motion seeks, in essence, to recommend an urban and regional planning unit be established in the Department of Planning for the implementation of town and country planning function in accordance with Section 25 and the 5th Schedule of the Tobago House of Assembly Act of 1996. And again, I will have published the flowchart for that organizational structure. Secondly, there must be appropriate steps taken to ensure the transference to the Department of Planning all records, information and other resources relative to the performance of the town and country planning function in Tobago from the Ministry of Planning. Madam Presiding Officer, should this motion pass today, and I have no reason to believe it will not, as of tomorrow morning, I am dispatching to the Ministry of Planning with some alacrity a letter requesting that we meet and that preparations be made for transferring all of our information and documents to the Tobago House of Assembly. And let me pause there for a moment. I am very concerned. The whole Caribbean talking about reparations now. Now that the slave owners and the descendants of rapists passing through the Caribbean, taking photos up and down the place. The whole Caribbean talking about reparations. But Tobago have a set of its historical records down in Trinidad. And nobody seemed to care about taking them back to Tobago. And I'm giving signal, and not just Ministry of Planning, but those of our documents that reside in the National Archives, all of our artifacts that belong to Tobago and is in Trinidad, we are coming for all of them. They belong to us.
Member for Palatine, answer me. You have 10 more minutes.
Sure. The Tobago Spatial Development Strategy will have to be ratified, so I will bring that to the House and ratify that at a later point once that strategy is built out and agreed upon by the Executive. Approval for the continued work on and the completion of the Spatial Development Plan be granted. Preparation for the automation of the application and approval process be commenced. And this is something we want to get on sooner rather than later. We can't be fumbling around with documents. And the benefit of this, Madam Presiding Officer, is that when you go to our units like land registry and so on, and inland revenue, every single time an officer has to take up a piece of document and handle it to photocopy it, that document can depreciate based on the age of the document. If we digitize our documents, a request comes for a cadastral or something, you just print it out while safeguarding the original document, because some of these records will be extremely old. Some would have predated us as an independent country. And so digitization works also in that benefit. Preparation for public review of complex types of applications be commenced as well. And I'm very clear about that. Any major construction in Tobago, they have to do like Secretary James has been doing, he and his team, going out to the public and asking what you think. So people could say, I don't like this, I don't like that. James will fight up with the seating, start on land, do this first, do that second. So you have a chance to say what you like and don't like for any complex planning facility. A communication plan for continued interface with the communities throughout Tobago be done. An advisory tongue planning panel to the Secretary for Planning, similar to the advisory panel to the Minister of Planning, be established to consider appeals. And as soon as we get the structure set up, that will be one of the first things we will do. So your appeals will not be to any panel down in Trinidad. Your appeals will happen right here in Tobago by Tobagonians who understand your own land use and understand the nuances in Tobago. I want to end this first part of my contribution by speaking to some of the benefits. And the speakers who will come after me will speak to some of the other benefits of doing this. One, devolution of authority. That's one of the benefits. It means that there is decision-making closer to the locality where the development is to take place. That affords better policy alignment and sensitivity to the realities at local level, which can be lost when the national scale is taken into account. And we all know of areas in Tobago still deemed as farmlands. But when you drive, there's all kind of big supermarkets and commercial activity and all sort of big houses built there. But again, only devolution of power and authority in this case and function in this case will allow the function of town and country planning to be closer to the locality and allow it to be better aligned to our needs. Recently I learned that right in Sergeant Kane, consider that as farmlands. What part of Sergeant King look like farmlands? Right in town. But guess what? At the moment, somebody in Trinidad deciding that for you. not you. The initiation of updated land use plans, the THA can have a greater direction over the consultation and development of Tobago's spatial development strategy and the land use plans. Currently, that responsibility is lodged with the minister in section 5 of chapter 35.1, and this Tobago spatial development strategy will provide internal regional guidance on what are the broad development imperatives for districts in Tobago, from which the land use plan will provide detailed land use zones to rationalize the sustainable utilization of land, and in particular allow for the preservation of agricultural land for agricultural purposes and the conservation of environmentally sensitive areas, especially in the hilly and often vulnerable eastern side of Tobago, which now has the designation of man and the biosphere. A third benefit is better administration of applications. Currently, the average age of an application reaching the final point of approval is 5 months. So on average, it takes you 5 months for approval. Clearly, nobody is considering the ease of doing business in Tobago, and that is contrary to the standard actually set by Chapter 35.1, which mandates that nationally it should be 2 months maximum. This is due to backlogs within the system at town and country planning and also our public health department. This is complicated further by applications requiring approvals from fire service and WASA. Currently, there are over 300 plans with defects between these two agencies in Trinidad, covering the period 2015 to present. So we have over 300 plans down in Trinidad. And I don't understand why WASA have to take our plans down in Trinidad. Why fire service has to take our plans down in Trinidad? Isn't there a department in Tobago? Why not hire the relative staff in Tobago and do it locally? And what we hope to do is to be able to bring all the players in one room, around one table, look at all the applications so that things are not being passed from this desk to a desk over yonder, and a desk back in our next place, and a desk over so and over back wrong so. We're not doing the shadow type direction of go wrong so, come back so, go wrong so. Bringing everything into one space to allow for greater efficiency and speed with treating with these applications. Fourth, it allows for better economic performance. These 300 plus unsigned applications are deferred dreams of residents or nationals intended to develop the island. Think about that for a moment. Think about how many construction companies, how many of those youth men in the village could I get a work building somebody's house, building out somebody's business. That is deferred because our things only go to pack up in Trinidad, and Tobago doesn't deserve any kind of development as per the attitudes of the central government. And it's not just this central government, the one past and all of them past is the same thing, because all of them were there and did not see to fix this issue. The ease of doing business, and I spoke about that, it cannot take 5 months on average just to get a plan approved. Cannot. Your circumstances could change in 5 months. No investor waiting that long to know whether or not they could invest or not invest. They'll move on. And I could tell you, we have foreign direct investments as per information sent to me by InvestTT, a function and a company under the Ministry of Trade, where foreigners apply for the land license for all kind of FDIs, waiting 3 and 4 years and no answer. No yes, no, wait a minute, nothing, no answer, just no answer. Meanwhile, the THA sit down here having the power in law to carry out the function and not doing it. If we don't mind our business, them will not mind it for you. Because in their mind, Tobago's business is not a priority. And if we don't prioritize Tobago's business, no one else will do it for us. And this administration is about prioritizing the business of the people of Tobago. And finally, as a final benefit, It will allow for enhanced labor force profile. The adoption of the function of town and country planning will require the recruitment of skilled technical staff in areas like GIS, computer programming, networking, land use planning, and currently, town and country planning development staff complement is just about 11, and the adoption of functions will require at least 8 new technical positions for it to run smoothly. Other areas likely to benefit will include surveillance, reporting and curtailing of illegal development, squatting, and the control of billboards and roadside advertisements, among others. Madam Presiding Officer, this is an important motion. This is a clear signal that Tobago means business about its autonomy. I will say it again. We cannot walk around this place making noise for greater autonomy, and the powers we do have, we are not utilizing them. We have to use the powers we actually have, and that will facilitate Tobago's growth and development. And so I say to those in the business sector, those trying to do development, those private developers on the island, those Tobagonians in the construction sector, those waiting to get approval for your homes, those being told that your building can't be taller than a coconut tree because somebody in Trinidad thinks that the furthest height we could reach is that of a coconut tree. I say to you, your wait is almost to an end, because this new administration is bringing home the function for town and country planning, which will result in greater development for the people of Tobago and will position Tobago in that place where we are well on our way to making Tobago the greatest little island on the planet. Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer.
Honorable members, the question proposed is, whereas Section 25(1) of the Tobago House of Assembly Act 1996 provides as follows: without prejudice to Section 75(1) of the Constitution, the Assembly shall, in relation to Tobago, be responsible for the formulation and implementation of policy in respect of the matters set out in the 5th schedule. And whereas Section 25(2) of the said Act empowers the Assembly to do all such acts and take all such steps as may be necessary for or incidental to the exercise of its powers or for the discharge of its duties. And whereas town and country planning is one of the matters set out in the 5th schedule as item number 15, and whereas the institutional structure has not been put in place to implement this function, be it resolved that this House authorize the Executive Council to take immediate steps to establish the institutional structure for the implementation of the town and country planning function by the Assembly in accordance with the Tobago House of Assembly Act of 1996. Assemblyman Natisha Charles Pantin, you may join the debate.
Madam Presiding Officer, I want to begin by thanking my constituents of Bagatelle Bacolet for allowing me to represent their views and by extension the views of the people of Tobago. As a woman from a rural community, a woman from Kokowati Trace Mason Hall, I feel extremely proud to stand here and speak as the Secretary for the Division of Food Security, Natural Resources, the Environment and Sustainable Development, and to have as the Secretary for Finance, Trade and the Economy, the Chief Secretary and the Head of the Executive Council of the Tobago House of Assembly, the Honorable Mr. Farley Chavez Augustine. Madam Presiding Officer, I have a crucial mandate today. That is, to present and lay in the chamber the justification for the establishment of the institutional structure for the implementation of the Town and Country Planning function by the Assembly in accordance with the Tobago House of Assembly Act 40, 1996. Madam Presiding Officer, under the THA Act 40, 1996, the THA was assigned responsibility for the Town and Country Planning. At the time of passage, according to the Town and Country Planning Act of 1960, this meant responsibility to make and implement policy in Tobago for the orderly and progressive development of land in both urban and rural areas, and to preserve and improve the amenities thereof, for the grant of permission to develop land and for other powers of control over the use of land, to confer additional powers in respect of the acquisition and development of land for planning and for purposes connected with the matters aforesaid. Madam Presiding Officer, this was extended to cover marine spaces for aquaculture by the Planning and Facilitation of Development Act of 2014. Further, of relevance to the Tobago House of Assembly, this act created a national planning agency with responsibility to, among other matters, address key elements of the planning function. B, advise the minister in accordance with Part A of the second schedule with respect to the framing of development policies referred to in Section 5.2 and to ensure consistency and continuity in the implementation of policies adopted by the minister in accordance with Parts 4, 5, 6, and 7. C, prepare and keep under review a spatial development strategy for Trinidad and Tobago, hereinafter referred to as the National Spatial Development Strategy, for the purpose of Section 18.1. D, develop regulations, standards, and practices for building, engineering operations, and land development, and submit them for the approval of the minister. Madam Presiding Officer, as written, this law does not contemplate removal of the Tobago House of Assembly responsibility for Town and Country Planning from the 5th schedule of the THA Act. And under Section 7.2 of this 2014 Act, the National Planning Agency is required to consult with the Tobago House of Assembly when performing the functions listed as B, C, and D above. Taken together, all of the above laws admit the crucial role that the Tobago House of Assembly must play in the Town and Country Planning to support the development of the Tobago economy. Further, Madam Presiding Officer, Tobago is a small island jurisdiction. Its spatial resources are accordingly limited and must be used in an informed way to facilitate orderly development across the island. In light of the 5th schedule of Act 40, 1996, development of the Tobago economy is the responsibility of the Tobago House of Assembly. Implementation of a meaningful development agenda gives rise to an enormous variety of projects as well as population growth, in which in turn requires considerable forward thinking to ensure that Tobago evolves as an efficiently used and inviting space for visitors, residents, and businesses alike. Madam Presiding Officer, the use of spatial resources must be segregated and regulated, and the growing population accommodated to ensure optimal outcomes, including those related to preservation of the environment for future generations. Therefore, as contemplated by Act 40, 1996, all segregation and regulation of use of Tobago spatial resources should be properly done by the Tobago House of Assembly to enable adequate reflection of the local facts, the local development agenda, as well as the wishes of its stakeholders and their views about what is to be done with Tobago's assets. The responsibility of the Tobago House of Assembly, Madam Presiding Officer. Attention should be drawn to the reading of Section 25.1 of the THA Act, as allowing the THA to make and implement policy on spatial resource use without prejudice to Section 75.1 of the Constitution. The THA Act contains specific mechanisms for the Cabinet to ascertain that the THA actions on Town and Country Planning do not prejudice its responsibilities, and It also allows the THA to institute inclusive policy-making mechanisms to capture the will of the people of Tobago. Continuation of the somewhat recent practice of uninformed external decisions about the use of Tobago's spatial resources risks significant consequential vulnerability to the damaging effects of climate change, fire hazards, and flooding. Madam Presiding Officer, the evidence of the last 20 years is that there is also the risk of inadequately located infrastructure and even housing settlements on precious, scarce, fertile agricultural land in an environment in which food security is emerging as a matter of priority. Madam Presiding Officer, the associated lack of sustainability then poses a serious threat to successful implementation of Tobago's development agenda, especially hindering the growth of its population and economy, as well as that of the nation. Embrace of the active responsibility for all elements of tongue and country planning by the Tobago House of Assembly, as envisaged under Act 40, 1996, allows locally informed and futuristic management of Tobago's ecological diversity, its cultural and historical heritage and natural resources, ensuring that these will be around for future residents and visitors to appreciate and enjoy. Division's responsibility. Madam Presiding Officer, the segregation and regulation of use of Tobago's spatial resources must be done by a division of the Tobago House of Assembly that has a panoramic view of modern issues such as increased population growth, climate change, and unsustainable development, and can develop and deploy public policy as an instrument that enables adequate equity and balance in the use of spatial resources and infrastructure for development while conserving Tobago's attractive environment for use by future generations. The division must deploy this panoramic perspective to analyze use of Tobago's spatial resources, included in rural areas, as a dynamic process, and then formulate plans for the optimal utilization of those spatial resources in the development process consistent with environmental requirements and socio-economic trends. Given the configuration of its current responsibilities, the ideal division to manage this function of tongue and country planning seems to be the division of food security, natural resources, the environment, and sustainable development. By design, Madam Presiding Officer, the division must deploy effective scientific methods to monitor and optimize the spatial use of land and other natural resources by Tobago's agricultural systems and ensure environmental sustainability while achieving food security. The synergies with tongue and country planning are immediately clear. Modern spatial use analysis involves professional application of scientific methods with large data sets that document the dynamic effects of public policy interventions. These methods identify resulting patterns related to demographic, geographic, and economic data. For example, the effects of policy on the following would normally be considered, such as population size, spatial distribution of settlements, special spaces such as community parks, playgrounds, and other public infrastructure, water sources and supplies, transportation patterns, land and soil quality and related food security needs and production patterns, premium carbon reducing energy supply potential, healthcare and social services, tourism applications, and the changing impact of land use. These are the same patterns that are already being monitored by the Division of Food Security, Natural Resources, the Environment, and Sustainable Development, as it seeks to manage its current functions effectively. Madam Presiding Officer, important among the modern scientific methods used to predict the evolution of use of spatial resources is the Geographical Information System, GIS, with built-in predictive analytics that the Division of Food Security, Natural Resources, the Environment, and Sustainable Development is already moving to use in its current functions. The GIS will allow the division to model and monitor short-term issues such as the movement of people in a geographical space and long-term issues such as agricultural and commercial applications of land and their effects on the development of the society, economy, and the environment. A key synergy will be achieved through this division's needed data collection efforts. As the division conducts appropriate censuses of agriculture, other enterprises can also be covered, and the GIS can be populated with data that allow the THA to predict the changing demographics and growth of Tobago's population as it implements its development agenda. In turn, appropriate spatial planning will allow the THA to prepare for the predicted changes by ensuring access to high-quality and yet affordable housing. Location of the responsibility in the Division of Food Security, Natural Resources, the Environment, and Sustainable Development is clearly a win-win proposition for the people of Tobago. Put summarily, because of the wide range of scientific applications that are needed and well aligned to its current responsibilities, the ideal division to manage this function of the Tongue and Country Planning in Tobago seems to be the Division of Food Security, Natural Resources, the Environment, and Sustainable Development. Fundamental questions and their answers. Madam Presiding Officer, as Tobago pursues its development agenda, fundamental questions will arise about our approach to the optimal use of our geographical space. Among these are the following. How should residential property values across Tobago's communities be optimized and preserved? What are the incompatible activities and what limits should be placed on them, say building size, height, breadth, depth, and where can they take place? What spatial and technological rules about housing, industrialized tourism, and retailing activities are needed to protect Tobago from excessive despoilment and enable achievement of its sustainability goals? How should residential construction be related to traffic circulation, bulk and density levels, congestion and crime, given the growing need for efficient transportation of goods, resources, and people? How should the basic needs of water, energy, and economic growth be balanced against the need for environmental conservation and the active reduction in carbon dioxide and methane emissions? How should the existing historical and cultural heritage be preserved as the built environment changes to enable successful economic development in Tobago? In short, what are the spatial and environmental requirements of Tobago's development plan? And what should be the accompanying zoning codes and regulations that will achieve the desired outcomes? The bottom-up approach of the Division of Food Security, Natural Resources, the Environment, and Sustainable Development. Traditionally, Madam Presiding Officer, left under the control of the ministry based in Trinidad, these questions were answered using a top-down approach as experts determine the best use of spatial resources, considering efficiency, sanitation, protection, and use of the environment, and the effects of specific use patterns on the social and economic activities of society. However, under the Tobago House of Assembly and the Division of Food Security, Natural Resources, the Environment, and Sustainable Development, priority emphasis would be placed on the interests, health, and well-being of residents, businesses, and communities, while achieving environmental sustainability in line with the Sustainable Development Goals. Here, Madam Presiding Officer, it is critical to observe that, consistent with its responsibilities, spatial planning under the Division of Food Security, Natural Resources, the Environment, and Sustainable Development would seek to ensure ecological sustainability by prohibiting actions that will destroy the habitats of wildlife, even as Tobago moves to raise the productivity of agriculture to increase food security. Crucially, the division is already adopting an approach to environmental sustainability that involves switching to energy systems that minimize carbon and methane emissions and switching to reliable, energy-efficient, and widely available public transportation systems. Environmentally sustainable use of spatial resources will also be water-sensitive and involve technological upgrades designed to minimize water waste in agricultural and other uses. Madam Presiding Officer, Tobago and its village communities have their own objectives when it comes to spatial resource use, and appropriately so. Madam Presiding Officer, the most urgent concerns of our village communities are sustainability, water reliability and sensitivity, community survival and renewal, climate change, cultural and historical heritage, and conservation. The ecologies, populations, community economies, and historical heritage of Tobago's village communities are all very unique. Thus, it is critical that the Tobago House of Assembly exercise its responsibility to collaborate with Tobago's village communities to ensure that their various spatial resource use, desires, and requirements are met. Madam Presiding Officer, from my extensive interactions with them as a former THA scientist and in my brief stint as a secretary so far, I can tell you that the Tobago's village communities are likely to argue stoutly for the preservation of their historical heritage sites, which in turn represents a case for preservation and even creation of inviting public spaces and trails, and for the promotion of social cohesion. These issues now also make it clearer that the spatial use questions must be answered and spatial use patterns determined, guided by a single model achievement of desirable outcomes, guiding the achievement of desirable outcomes. One that also involves residents who are most likely to be affected by change in the rate of development in Tobago. The concept of participatory spatial planning is also important here, since it reflects the degree of democracy Tobagonians can enjoy in their own communities. Madam Presiding Officer, spatial planning in Tobago should not be autocratic and top-down. Within a participatory framework, the role of the town and country planner changes from that of solely an expert to also that of a collaborator and mediator between different groups of stakeholders in each village community. To close, Madam Presiding Officer, the Tobago House of Assembly and the Division of Food Security, Natural Resources, the Environment, and Sustainable Development are fully committed to this approach, and the division is already moving to deploy it to improve its delivery of its mandated services to the people of Tobago within the framework of the development strategy that is currently being specified. Madam Presiding Officer, thank you for the opportunity to present this case on behalf of my constituents of Bagatelle Bacolet and by extension, the people of Tobago.
Assemblyman Kelvon Morris, you may join the debate.
Madam Presiding Officer, I thank you for the opportunity to contribute to the debate of this motion, which inter alia seeks to create a town and country authority and institution managed by the Tobago House of Assembly in keeping with the spirit of the Tobago House of Assembly Act 1996. And, Madam Presiding Officer, for all that was said before, I know the majority side would have indicated the benefits. And as a proud Tobagonian, you know, I do not need to be convinced as to the importance of such a motion and, you know, the need for us in Tobago to have that authority to control the management of the town and country function here in Tobago. As a member of the People's National Movement and admitted by the Chief Secretary, steps were indeed taken before now to ensure that we have the institutional framework that can follow once the Planning and Facilitation and Development Act is fully proclaimed. As a matter of public record, Madam Presiding Officer, it is important to note, as mentioned, that similar matters of this nature relating to the effective management of the town and country function in Tobago have been pursued by previous administrations of this Assembly as a means to ensure greater efficiency in the processing of planning matters of Tobago. Madam Presiding Officer, I must admit that today's debate is indeed a bit bittersweet for me as a young Tobagonian. It is bittersweet because, you see, while we seek to salvage the desert today, just a couple months ago, the People's Democratic Party, the PDP, caused Tobago to lose the entire three-course meal. The irony of today's debate is that had the PDP supported the Tobago Constitutional Amendment Bill as laid, then the town and country function that we now seek to claim would have automatically lay in the full premise of the Tobago House of Assembly. Because you see, we would have had control of those areas to which the Tobago Island government would have had unfettered control. In addition to the fact that the bill empowered not only the institutional framework for the town and country function, but the Tobago Constitutional Amendment Bill also provided us here in this very august house with the ability to legislate over those matters to which we want to control. Because you see, Madam Presiding Officer, one of the fundamental issues and challenges with implementing the town and country function is not so much the responsibility, but it has to do more so with the legislative authority. And because we in this house, all we can do is come and debate motions and cannot necessarily pass laws, then we do not have the legislative teeth to put into motion all the things that the very noble intentions, but we just do not have the legislative authority, or we just cannot just take the legislative authority from the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago. That legislative authority needs fundamental adjustment to the relationship between Trinidad and the relationship between Trinidad and Tobago. And I would give you an example, because you see, what is interplaying here, Madam Presiding Officer, is not simply an issue of tongue and country in silos, but we all know that Tobago, there's a long-standing issue when it comes to land titles. And if you talk to the persons in town and country, they will tell you those same 300 files that the Chief Secretary cited as languishing somewhere, waiting for approvals. The majority of those files are really embedded with issues relating to land title and ownership. So until we have the legislative teeth to fix those issues right here in Tobago, we're really wasting time, you know. Because all the things that we want to have fixed by having the full control of the function cannot be fixed unless we treat with the attending legislations. We are talking about land title issues. Madam Presiding Officer, suffice it to be so, we on the minority side welcome the opportunity to salvage whatever is left, because we understand that there is still a great need to have the tongue and country arrangement that is more sensitive to the intricate needs of Tobagonians and our very delicate land title challenges. We support the move to address this, to fix this. And it's quite ironic and quite relevant that we have Mr. Charles in the chamber today, because I'm moved to quote one of his famous terms, which goes like this. Sir Charles always would say that good administration cannot fix bad policy. And therefore, it is my respectful view that while we hasten to implement this most noble and well-intentioned policy, we at the same time should seek to ensure that we dot our I's, cross our T's, we follow due process, and we ensure that at the end of the day, what is done right, and what we achieve is in fact good administration in harmony with good policy. Madam Presiding Officer, it is in this context that I posit to this honorable House that we all, notwithstanding our political differences, have a sacred responsibility and a solemn responsibility to ensure the policies we approve in the Assembly Legislature of the Tobago House of Assembly are in fact in harmony with the Constitution of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. It can be effectively implemented, and ultimately it can achieve its intended outcomes. And I know you are a new administration. I understand the excitement and the enthusiasm, you know, to get things done. As the Chief Secretary would have indicated, you all have your mandate. And we hear the cries. We all hear the cries of Tobagonians, and we want to treat with the cries of Tobagonians. But at the same time, we must appreciate that the THA Act in its current incarnation is somewhat imperfect, and in fact, it may be very well inadequate and irrelevant to the current needs of the modern Tobago. And it is for this reason I wish to caution this honorable House, because we talked a lot about Section 25(1) and what it says and what it means, and by now I'm sure most of the persons listening to this debate has a full appreciation for what for the letter of that specific section in the THA Act. But we must also consider that we have the sleeping, I would call the sleeping demon in the house, because until we treat with 75-1 and the current cabinet domination when it comes to the affairs and the management of the Tobago House of Assembly, we will be in fact confined to a judgment that I would want to read for the attention of this House. And I'm surprised. You know, I'll give the Chief Secretary a pass. I know he was eager to score political points and come to tell us what the PNM didn't do. And I understand his duty. But I was surprised that the Secretary of, well, I'll call it Agriculture just for short because it's so long. But I'm surprised that the Secretary with his responsibility for agriculture failed to mention this very significant judgment that treats with the relationship of this very 25-1, the matters that we are responsible for in the 5th schedule, including forestry and the town and country planning. And this matter is in the name of the Tobago House of Assembly versus the Attorney General of Trinidad and Tobago, CV 2013-00153, dated 10th June 2015. And basically, the case summary is this, and I'll read it into the records very quickly because I have some other points I'd like to make. The Tobago House of Assembly is a statutory body created under the THA Act 1980. In its infancy, the THA did not have autonomy. However, a 1996 amendment to the THA Act was designed to remove the limitations which prevented the THA from implementing policies in relation to the Tobago, and particularly matters set out in the 5th schedule of the Act. The THA has alleged that the government has bypassed it and failed to collaborate with the THA on issues arising from matters failing within the 5th schedule of the THA Act. So here it is, we are dealing with a very similar matter. The basis of the THA's claim was that the government has failed to consult with and include the THA in much of the decision-making process as it relates to matters falling within the 5th schedule. This THA contends that it is in contravention of the provisions of Section 25(1). So this very section that we would have indicated that gives us all the power and all the responsibility and all the authority is under the spotlight in this judgment. A memorandum of understanding was drawn up in relation to this plan whereby the parties agreed to hold joint meetings to exchange and disseminate relevant information. Upon the expiration of the MOU, there has been no discussion or report forthcoming from the government with respect to the plan. As a result of the lack of information, the THA engaged its own project developers to prepare a project plan which was known as the Tobago Reforestation Program. Further to this, and under the National Reforestation and Watershed Program, there was the implementation of community groups. These groups acted as contractors and persons from within the community were hired to work on the program. This thereby generated an income for persons in the community. The claimant, the THA, has alleged that sometime in August 2012, the government unlawfully terminated the engagement of these community groups in the National Reforestation and Watershed Program, contrary to the THA Act. The ministry later informed the workers that new contractors had been contracted, and there was a commitment in place for these workers with the new contractors. The claimant asserted that on proper construction of Section 25(1) of the Act, it is entitled to implement plans and policies in relation to all matters falling under the 5th schedule. Forestation is one such matter. Moreover, the claimant contended that it was necessary that it seek leave or approval from the cabinet or the government in so doing. Nor is the government entitled so to do without consulting the THA. And the court, upon examination of the THA Act, contended, and this is the court's ruling now, that the language of Section 25(1), the basis upon which our new institutional arrangement will be built upon, the language of Section 25(1) of the THA Act is plain and unambiguous. This court also noted that the 5th schedule responsibilities have a national impact. And what is instructive about this is that the court used as an example town and country planning. So the very thing that we are trying to deal with here today, the court in this judgment would have indicated.
Member for Darrell Springwim.
Yes.
Unfortunately, we would have to suspend the House until 5 o'clock. We are now going to take a tea break. We will resume at 5 with you.
Okay.
Assemblyman Augustine.
Madam Presiding Officer, I beg to move that we postpone the time for the tea break to allow the minority leader to complete his presentation, subsequent to which we take the tea break and then resume the rest of the sitting after the tea break.
Members, the motion is that the time be extended to allow the minority leader to conclude his presentation. All in favor, say aye. Any against? The ayes have it. Minority leader, please continue.
Thank you, Honorable House. So we were at the point where the court noted that the 5th schedule responsibilities have national impact, and of course the court cited some of the 5th schedule matters to which Tobago House of Assembly have responsibility for, such as town and country planning, the matter that we are discussing here today, infrastructure, including air and sea transport, wharves and airports and public utilities, telecommunication, as well as health services. And I'll touch on the health services a little later down to show you the difference in how you are able to actualize and harmonize policy and law. Therefore, the court contended if Tobago was allowed to have autonomy where these responsibilities are concerned, it would lead to confusion and potential disaster in the management and direction of national affairs. Right? And I just want to summarize the order itself because it goes into more detail. Right? Because it talks about the court found that on the plain reading of Section 21 of the THA Act, there are no powers given to the THA under the THA Act 1996 to the exclusion of the general powers given to Cabinet. And as I remember, I mentioned this creature that is 75(1). And until we as Tobagonians can come together and treat with that very issue of 75(1) having domination over Trinidad and Tobago, my brothers and sisters, fellow colleagues, we really ain't saying nothing. The order is as follows. Thus, the order by the court in the matter of the construction of Section 25(1) of the Tobago House of Assembly Act, Chapter 2503, together with the 5th schedule thereto in relation to Section 75(1) of the Constitution of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, was that A1. Section 25(1) in its plain and ordinary meaning means that any responsibility given to the Tobago House of Assembly pursuant to Section 25(1) of the Act must be subject to the overriding and overarching national policy directives of the Cabinet of the Government of Trinidad and Tobago. B. Section 25(1) gives the THA responsibility to implement policies that are consistent with that of the government in the instances where the government already has policy in place. And of course, we only look at this current arrangement with Town and Country. There's a clear policy in place with respect to how we treat with Town and Country. And finally, C, which is very instructive, Section 25(1) of the Act does not give the THA, the Tobago House of Assembly, responsibility to formulate and/or implement policy in respect of matters set out in the 5th schedule of the Act, which may frustrate or hamper the implementation of government policy. And with that, I rest this matter for the attention of the Chief Secretary and his cabinet in going forward in formulating a policy so that we can ensure that this most important issue is done properly. Madam Presiding Officer, fortunately for us in this chamber, and I just read the legal judgment and the issues there too. So therefore, the question we all got to ask ourselves is whether what we are doing here today is in keeping with this judgment and the law, and whether we are not in fact attempting to repeat the same thing, however, expecting a different result. Madam Presiding Officer, even if we contend that the courts were wrong, that the court judgment was wrong in its interpretation, and we as the THA do have the right to create our own statutory authority to fill the functions of Town and Country here in Tobago, how then do we treat with the current Town and Country Act, which in itself is very clear that all Town and Country function as it currently exists is subjected to the Town and Country Planning Act, Chapter 3501, Act 25 of 1960, and devolves the responsibility for the administration of Town and Country Planning to the Minister of Planning and Development. And the Act is clear, it states, the Minister shall secure consistency and continuity in the framing and execution of a comprehensive policy with respect to the use and development of all land in Trinidad and Tobago in accordance with a development plan prepared in accordance with the provisions of Part 2. And just before I go further, I just want to clarify a statement the Chief Secretary made, because he was on record as saying that wherever you see minister, it automatically is substituted by secretary, and that is not how the law works. In fact, if it's not spelled out in the law, then it doesn't apply. And in this instance, the minister means the minister. So yes, there's nothing, and it's clear, there's nothing stopping us from establishing the institutional structure. Nothing. However, we may end up no different from the very issues we're trying to solve when it comes to land title and Town and Country. A man with a piece of land with no legal title. And the very problems we are trying to solve remains because while Section 25(1) of the THA Act grants us sole responsibility, the Town and Country Act, as it currently exists, limits the THA's involvement and authority to implement the policy. Madam Presiding Officer, I am the consummate optimist. I am a Tobago patriot. I do believe there is a way we can satisfy both the spirit of this motion in harmony with the law. Thankfully, just as there is appropriate case study where the law and the policy was in conflict and there were issues, there's also a perfect template where the policy and the law were also harmonized. This example can be found in the establishment of the institutional structure for the implementation of the health function of the Tobago Regional Health Authority in accordance with the THA Act of 1996 and the Regional Health Authority Act. So, outside of us having the autonomy to come in here and have the law-making powers, if we really want to have the car...
Member, you have 5 minutes.
Does that include the 1 or 2 minute break that we had before the motion was moved to extend my time?
Yes, it was.
Okay. But I'm wrapping up, so... Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. So, notwithstanding, we don't have the authority here to change what we are trying to do, then the next best alternative is to utilize this opportunity that we have with the Planning and Facilitation and Development Act, which is not yet fully proclaimed, and thus presents us with a perfect opportunity to ensure that the same way the Regional Health Authority Act was implemented, and in the same way it gave Tobago and the Tobago Regional Health Authority its autonomy, we can now use this template to ensure that we have harmony with policy and harmony with law. As I was winding up, and as I'm winding up, perhaps if I would not put it, but perhaps if we want to make this motion effective and get the kind of outcome that we seek, then perhaps we may further amend this resolution to also include and perhaps read a further amendment where we resolve to have this House authorize the Executive Council to take immediate legislative steps to harmonize the institutional structure with the applicable Town and Country Planning Law. I thank you.
Thank you, Member for Darrell Springwim. As agreed before, we would now suspend the House for half an hour for a tea break.